The security guy rode up the elevator with me and opened the door to the girls' room with a key. I entered and heard the key turn in the lock once again. My stomach dropped. Only now I understood what "we can't go out" really meant. The girls were locked in, like in prison. I want to talk about freedom and the different types of freedom that exist. And it's something that I think about a lot, especially when I'm traveling and I'm meeting women in different countries. And I see that it becomes very clear that as a Western woman, I have a lot of freedom that I take for granted, that I think, of course, I must have these kinds of freedoms, but actually they are not existing for many people in the world, and especially women. There are a lot of restrictions on women's lives. And I can think of like 3 different kind of categories of freedom that make a big impact on any person's life. And one would be like personal type of things, like marriage. Like, are you able to choose who you marry? Are you able to choose not to marry anybody? And can you get out of that marriage if you want to? Or does that possibility not exist at all to you? And of course, with that comes children. Being able to choose if you want to have children, when, how many, how fast, one after the other. Many people don't have this kind of freedom of choice. And actually, like, I've had several people ask me, like, about my marriage. Like, so was it a love marriage? You know, as opposed to like arranged marriage? And of course, that's like such a shocking question to hear, because for me, that's all that exists, right? Like, what else would it be? Although it's like, I find it to imagine like that my mom in Finland, like, and my husband's mom in Switzerland, like, got together, like, and schemed, like, oh, let's get our kids to marry each other, and like arranged it. But no, that's not like how it happened. It was a love marriage. But that's not something that is obvious for everybody in the world at all. And then there's that kind of professional and financial freedom. Like, are you able to study what you want to study? Hi, Ajayant. Are you able to choose the kind of field you want to work in? Or are you able to choose to work or not work at all? Is that even an option you can consider? Also, like in my case, like I can be a dancer if I want to be, but maybe someone else has to be a dancer because there's actually no other good choice for them. Life is unfair that way. And with work comes financial freedom sometimes. And by that, I don't mean just, having tons of money and being able to get everything. I just mean like being able to get the basics for yourself. Like your survival. Is it depending on other people throughout your life? Or can you house yourself and feed yourself? Because with that comes a lot of other freedom that you can choose for yourself. But if you're always dependent on other people for your survival, then that limits your choices in other areas as well. And not everybody, even though they work their whole life, of course, not everybody has financial freedom ever. Like, I remember being at the airport in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and I was in the bathroom, and this cleaning girl, around my age, young woman, like, started to talk to me, and she wanted to know where I'm going and all that. And hi, Roxana. And then she asked, like, so are you traveling alone? I said, yeah. And she wanted to know, how did you get your ticket? Like, how was I able to buy a ticket for myself? And this question shocked me a little bit, and I kind of didn't know what to say. And I said something like, well, I'm working, but here she is working as well. But just because she's working doesn't mean that she has the freedom to do things like air travel. So another thing that we take for granted, but is actually not available for everybody. And then the third type of freedom is that movement, freedom of movement, being able to travel, and also to be able to choose where you live. Like, do you have to maybe stay in the village or country you're born in your whole life because the society decides for you that this is where you are, this is where you stay? Maybe you don't like fulfill your potential, fulfill your ambitions ever because you cannot leave. Or some people have to leave the place where they're from and have to leave the country and go work in another country just to survive, just to provide for the family, and that's also not a choice. Like migrant workers who work for like sometimes very low wages in foreign countries, and that is not by choice. Like that's just a necessity. Or refugees who flee war. Also, they're not free to choose to stay home. And when I was doing these hotel contracts as a belly dancer in Arab countries, I think very often I was like the only person in the whole building who was there by choice because they wanted to be there. I was like, following my dreams and following my passion, and I want to be a dancer and I want to travel and I want to see the world and I'm on an adventure. But everybody else working there is there to make money, to send home to the family, to support the kids, to support their parents, to pay the school fees, this kind of thing. So it's a very different reality for people in the world. I remember one time this Filipina girl asked me, so do you send you send money home to your parents? And I said, no. And then I thought, oh, like I sound like such a bitch. And then I explained, like, they don't need my money. Like they have their money and their income. They don't need me to send them money. And then I felt like I just made it worse, Like the different realities are just very easy to see when you leave your comfort zone and this kind of Western bubble that we live in. Many of us live in. Okay. I want to take you first to Bahrain. Bahrain is a tiny country in the Arabian Gulf. It's an island. And to be honest, a lot of the nightlife entertainment revolves around alcohol and prostitution. It's like a playground for Saudi Arabians who cannot do these things at home. So they go to Saudi and Bahrain and have a good time. So that's kind of the nature of Bahrain. Now, I was dancing in a 5-star hotel for 3 months. Nice, classy place, families having dinner and all that. I had 2 days off every week. And I had thought, okay, I can maybe go to Dubai sometimes, to get out of the island when I'm not working. But my visa didn't allow me to do that. So I felt trapped. I felt like I am stuck in Bahrain and I'm bored. And I wish I could just, get out of here sometimes. And this island is too small for me. And then I met these girls, these dancers who were working in another hotel and also living in that hotel, but under very different circumstances. Okay. I caught wind of 4 Eastern European girls, so-called go-go dancers, who spent their days under house arrest, unable to leave their hotel room. One was a friend of a friend, so I connected with her on Facebook. At night, the girls worked at a sad little bar in their 2-star hotel. This was essentially an Arabic version of a strip club. Girls in skimpy outfits swayed on a podium while men gawked. They made tips when customers bought them fake flowers. At least there was no nudity or physical contact of any kind. I arranged to visit the girls one afternoon. For this, they needed permission from the hotel management. At the agreed time, I headed over with ice cream for everyone. The staff at the reception met me with great suspicion. They couldn't grasp what I was there for and started making phone calls to this person and that. Was I visiting highly secretive sheikhs or go-go dancers? 20 minutes later, ice cream half melted, I finally got the clearance. The security guy rode up the elevator with me and opened the door to the girls' room with a key. I entered and heard the key turn in the lock once again. My stomach dropped. Only now I understood what "we can't go out" really meant. The girls were locked in like in prison. Was it even legal to house employees this way? The official reason was security, but the true concern was obvious. They assumed that unless chained to the radiator, the dancers would start whoring around town. The girls had taken this 6-month contract fully aware of the conditions. The pay was $700-800 a month, depending on the fake flower sales. Their room was big enough for 4 beds and some living space, and a single bathroom. There was no balcony and the windows couldn't be opened. Food was delivered into the room. It was the same chicken and fries every day. Dancing on the podium of the club was the girls' mental escape. If the manager was in a particularly good mood, he let them hang out for a while after closing time. The only time the girls left the building was a weekly trip to the mall. For those few hours, they were near ecstatic. When I described my unrestricted freedom, the girls could hardly believe their ears. They didn't know such contracts even existed. We were like different breeds of animals who came muzzle to muzzle for the first time. I walked back to my hotel in a gentle breeze, deep in thought. I didn't take a thing for granted that night. My soles brushing against the pavement sounded like music. Yeah, so they were in quarantine before it was trendy. Then at a later point, I was working in the Emirates. And also there was a group of Moroccan girls who were like dancing in a disco. And they lived just down the hall from where I was. And sometimes I was getting ready for work, I was putting on makeup, and I had my door open. And I saw the girls click, 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 go in their heels and dresses with their hair extensions and makeup and everything, go to work. And we looked at each other like, oh, wow. And then I heard them coming back late at night. And that was the only time these girls ever left the room. It's not uncommon in the world. Hi, Aisha. These things exist, these kind of contracts exist. And I can't imagine it being worth it, but for some girls it's worth it. And they told me that some of these girls like really lose their minds, like, and want to kind of jump out the window if only the window was open. And some of them go home after 6 months and recover and then go back. So that's a different type of work environment for sure. Okay, I want to talk about marriage. And let's go to Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. It is a resort town on the Red Sea coast. Here we go. One afternoon, I got to chatting with a young cashier in a clothing store. She was about to return to Cairo for her wedding. Mabruk, I congratulated her. What for? This bride had no desire to get married. She hated her fiancé. With violence and threats, her family was forcing her into it. He wasn't wealthy or related to the family in any way. He was simply relentless, and her family wanted her off their hands. To make matters worse, she would have to start covering her face after the wedding, like all women in his family. She had pleaded with her parents to reconsider, to no avail. Time was running out. The wedding was in 10 days. I'm going to kill myself, she said. I knew she didn't mean that now, but the day might come. I put my thinking cap on. There had to be some way out. What if you find a hiding place and tell your family you're not coming for the wedding? I said. They would have to call it off to save face. Sure, they would beat her up and call her every name in the book upon her return, but that was nothing new. The girl's eyes lit up. I could see her mind examine this new idea. It might work, she said. You have freedom. You can do what you want. I knew it to be true, even for her, even here. I took her number to check in later on, but couldn't bring myself to calling her. Chances were that bright new light quickly grew dim, and she re-entered the old, oppressive dynamics. It wasn't my business anyway. Now, I don't know what happened to her. I'm guessing she got married. That was not the only time I encountered like a forced marriage situation. It was in Egypt as well the other time. I was in Siwa, which is an oasis in the western desert near Libya, very secluded. They have their own culture, own language, everything, very much deep in the desert. And I got to visit a family inside their home. And then this woman, this mother of 5 or so, and the wife in this family, she told me that actually she's from Hurghada. Hurghada is a coastal town on the Red Sea, like a 2-day trip overland. She told me that her father took her to Siwa when she was 16 and married her off and left her there. Bye. So that's clearly a forced marriage, because no girl in their right mind would ever choose to be in that situation. And I can only imagine how devastating it was for a teenage girl who's coming from a coastal town where girls wear colors and teenage girls roam the streets hand in hand and they have their social life, and then to go into the desert, in a tiny desert town where women not only cover their face, but they wear like a cloth over everything else, and they look like with one eye to see where they're stepping. And you don't see many women outside at all. They basically stay home. And so to marry a stranger at age 16 and be left there, it must have been extremely difficult. Whew. However, she was telling me this story in front of her husband and in front of her children. So I got the feeling that now in her 40s, now she's happy with her life. She has freedom and she has power within her own family and her household. And it turned out okay for her. She's okay. But it's an unthinkable situation to be in, coming from like the Western world, where it's like, well, you can marry absolutely anybody you want, or not marry anyone, or marry a woman, or do whatever you want, actually, with your life. And then there's the reproductive freedom that comes with marriage. Of course, like for us to decide if we're going to have kids or not, or when, or how many, or once a year for the next 15 years, or do we want to have 2 or none, we need birth control. We need some kind of access to birth control, also access to abortion, which is sometimes life-saving medical procedure, let's face it. I mean, there's women doing life in prison right now for having a miscarriage, especially in Central America, like El Salvador is infamous for this. So I can't imagine having even a wanted child under those circumstances, because it could end really badly for you if something goes wrong. And the other side of that, choosing to have a kid, is to, well, I met a Syrian girl one time who told me that she had very late abortion. Not because she wanted to, but because she got pregnant with her boyfriend, fiance, and then it didn't work out. The relationship fell apart, and she felt that the only thing she can do now is to have an abortion. As difficult as that was. And then I met a Lebanese girl at a later point who had the same situation. She was pregnant with a boyfriend. It didn't work out. They broke up. They were supposed to get married. They didn't. And she said that the family held her down to have an abortion. So she didn't go into too many detail, but from what I understood is they probably tricked her into going to the clinic and then held her down to be sedated. And then the abortion was done against her will. And that sounds cruel for sure, but I believe that family had her best interest at heart, because the society doesn't take kindly to an unmarried mother, and the child is going to suffer, and the woman is going to suffer, and nothing good is going to come out of it. And they probably thought this is the only way she can have a chance at a normal life, a normal happy family life. She can later get married and have a family and and she's not going to be rejected by the society and stigmatized. 2 years ago, I was pregnant with my son, and I was kind of amazed at the circumstances. Like, I was pregnant by choice. I was having a baby by choice, and it really, I really felt for these women who didn't have this kind of freedom to choose, and how that's not something to take for granted, even in the Western world. In the Western world, I mean, look at what's happening in the States. They're shutting down clinics and denying women health care all around the country. Okay, it's a bit of a heavy topic, I know. Now, again in Sharm el-Sheikh, but let's go to a different scenario, a nightclub. I have to say, about all the Arab world, the nightclubs are kind of places of vice, you know, alcohol, prostitution, drugs, this kind of thing that the polite society doesn't really find respectable. So this in turn means that all the dancers and singers and musicians working in these nightclubs are also not really respectable, in a respectable profession. So it's kind of like an underworld. And even when you're a foreign dancer going to work in the Middle East, a lot of people will assume that you're there out of some kind of desperation and necessity. Like, this is the only thing she can do to make money. Like, you know, that poor thing, she had no choice but to come here and be a belly dancer. And sometimes I took the time to explain to people, like, well, actually I had like every choice in the world, and this is what I chose. Like I'm here because I can be here, not because I have to be here. But for a lot of people, that's like beyond their understanding. So there's no point to try to explain, like, you know, if you're a dancer, you must be like kind of underprivileged to begin with. Okay. I have to mention before I read this excerpt, Vanessa, my good friend Vanessa, a dancer in Cairo. At this time, she had a group in Sharm el-Sheikh, a folkloric dance group. And now that group was working in like nice tourist hotels in the early evening, totally respectable, totally different from the nightclub world. So I had one foot in both worlds. I wanted the polite and the sleazy. Okay. At 5 a.m, I got on the stage of a swanky new nightclub. Singers performed throughout the night. Hookers got up to show their stuff. The fluorescent dance floor and posh decor distinguished the place from other cabarets, low-end nightclubs. Ours was the only club in town with foreign belly dancers and a female vocalist imported from Lebanon. Any Egyptian girl willing to dress sexy and hold a mic would have made a killing in the Sharm circuit, but for some reason, none volunteered. Regardless of the appearance, the concept in the club was the same as in every other joint around town. The belly dancer was not a soloist. She worked alongside a singer who was the one running the show. He picked the tune to match the mood of the crowd, chatted between songs to keep the audience engaged, and hustled for tips, which the club kept. The belly dancer then was more of a decorative sidekick. Truth be told, most girls working in cabarets weren't professional dancers by any stretch of the word. So this stage arrangement worked well. I was overjoyed with the 7-piece band. The musicians were talented and energetic, and we bonded on and off stage. All had left behind wives and children to earn money in Sharm, and the only thing they drank on their breaks was coffee. Most nights I performed with Ali, a young singer with a sweet smile. He had an exquisite voice and no ego to speak of, making him a great work partner. The hookers shared my sentiment. Often I invited one to dance with me, and the next thing I knew, she was bent double and grinding her butt against Ali's crotch. He handled it like a pro, and unceremoniously backed away without missing a note. No matter what, I left the stage sweaty and fulfilled. On the drive back to the apartment, I watched the sun come up over the desert, feeling blessed beyond belief. Many nights I was brought home by the same taxi driver. He was Falahi from the countryside and had an ignorant innocence about him. "You have a baby?" he asked, looking for a logical explanation for my unfortunate career path. When he heard I was both single and childless, he hatched a plan for our future. We'd get married and move into his village. Their food was amazing. The bread was just delicious. I would absolutely love it up there. He failed to mention the obvious. After the wedding, it was supposed to be me cooking all that food. His attempt to make an honest woman out of me was nevertheless endearing. But I wasn't the one in need of rescuing. At the club, I saw an awkward young girl in the company of a seasoned hooker. A few days later, she sat on our living room couch for a job interview. Vanessa was hesitant to hire her. We didn't really need a new girl, especially one with no folkloric dance experience. Her reason for wanting to join us was that she urgently needed a place to live. Right now, she was staying with her so-called friend, who, from the looks of it, was more like a pimp. The anguish in her eyes broke my heart. It was a time-tested tale come to life. A young homeless runaway walking a tightrope between dance and prostitution. Vanessa referred her to other groups, and we wished her luck. Yeah, that was not a girl who wanted to dance out of passion and fulfilling her dreams like me. Actually, I don't think many people in the world get to follow their passions and dreams, at least not professionally. It's not often possible in societies. Excuse me. Okay. Hi, Phaedra. Thank you for the feedback. Let's go someplace completely different. I would love to ask if anybody knows where Western Sahara is, but it's a bit hard to talk like this. Western Sahara is a disputed area between Morocco and Mauritania, just underneath Morocco and above Mauritania on the African coast. And it used to be a Spanish colony. And then when Spain withdrew, with all the European powers finally leaving Africa and decolonizing Africa, Spain withdrew and Morocco went right in. Morocco took it. Tanks came in 1975. They just put the military in there, and now it's under military occupation. So it's sometimes called like the last colony of Africa, because it's the last country not to gain their independence in the African continent. And of course, according to Morocco, it's just the southern Morocco. You know, it's always been a part of Morocco, but according to the UN and according to the International Court of Justice, that is not the case. It should be its own country, and the people should have right to self-determination like everybody else. They have a different culture than Morocco. They speak a different Arabic dialect than Morocco. There are no pre-colonial ties between the two, so they got a raw deal. And how did this happen? Well, there's only a couple of 100,000 people living there. So it was easy for Morocco with 30 million people to just, take it. A little history lesson. Now, I went to visit a place in Algeria which houses a lot of refugees from Western Sahara. The people of Western Sahara are called Sahrawis. Sahrawis, meaning like Saharans in Arabic. And when Morocco came in, a lot of them fled just across the desert, ended up in Algeria, just across the border. And what has it been, 45 years later, they are still there, stuck in the refugee camps in the desert, which has become like a mud brick city in the middle of nowhere, with a couple 100,000 people living there. Now, I was working in Algeria, and when I was finishing my contract, I was able to take a few days to go visit this place before I left the country. So I flew in there. Yeah, let's read this excerpt. The cold hit me hard as I stepped off the plane at 1 a.m. Nobody appeared to be looking for me in the tiny arrival hall. I pulled out my note with the contact person and dialed the number. On the second try, a groggy-sounding man picked up, not understanding a word I was saying. He didn't know anything about me. "Where are you going?" a man behind me asked. "I'm not sure." He raised his eyebrows. "How did you come here?" "On the plane that just landed," I thought to myself. "Who invited you?" I showed him the name of my contact. It convinced him I wasn't a complete trespasser. "Okay, come." The man put me in a Polisario pickup truck with a group of Italians, and we headed out into the dark desert, only the headlights showing our way. There were several Algerian military checkpoints along the way where nationalities were asked and SACO references made. After an hour and a half on the sandy track, the first camp spread out on our right. Beckoned me to climb the bag. I could vaguely make out a few outlines of houses in the dark, proof of human habitation. A jolt of euphoria hit my bloodstream, drowning out the agitation left over from the airport and the uneasy ride into the unknown. A dot on the map, a scene from my imagination, had turned into tangible reality. There was nothing better than this feeling. The truck made a sharp turn, and the Italians waved goodbye. A guy with a flashlight greeted me. I followed him inside a dark building. It seemed like a bare-bones hotel. The rooms on the corridor were empty, with doors flung open. There was a squat toilet down the hall. The guy pointed at a room, gave me the flashlight, and left. The door didn't close all the way. I cleaned my face with a baby wipe, stumbled into the bathroom and back, and curled up fully clothed under 2 thick woolen blankets. I waited for my body heat to warm up the cocoon and fell asleep. There was nothing like the light of day to turn spooky into intriguing. Coffee and bread waited for me in the lobby as I crawled out. I got out into the blinding daylight and looked around. To my left was the gate I'd entered through, behind it a sea of sand, and on my right a sprawling mud brick refugee city. Someone beckoned me into a school building next to the hotel. Moments later, a young Sahrawi man walked in and greeted me in fluent English. Up until this moment, I had worried I wouldn't find any English speakers, and I would gain little understanding of the camp life. Mohammed Salem was 27 and a natural-born refugee. His parents had fled fighting in Western Sahara in 1975 when the Moroccan tanks rolled in. At the time, they had thought they'd be able to return home in a matter of days or weeks. We went for a walk around the camp. Few jobs existed here, but Mohammed Salem had one, teaching English at the school. The refugees survived mostly on the World Food Program diet: flour, sugar, oil, rice, tea, beans, and undernourishment was common. Growing anything in the desert was challenging, yet no one wished for rain, which could level the mud homes. To light up the dark nights and charge their phones, residents used small solar panels. There was no electricity. Water was delivered into communal containers by trucks. The refugees had what they needed to survive, but surviving wasn't the same as living. "Would you like to stay with my family for these 2 nights?" Mohammed Salem asked. "Really? If it's not an inconvenience, I'd love to." I got it now. Mohammed Salem hadn't found me by accident. He'd been alerted to take care of the lost and lonely English-speaking girl. Tactfully, he allowed me to get to know him a little bit before inviting me over. Now, to travel, right now we cannot travel, but most of the time we can because we have a passport. I have a passport, you probably have a passport. But actually there's like 12 million people in the world who are stateless. And the Sahrawi people are one big group. Palestinians are another big group. Many people for many different legal reasons are stateless. What does that mean? It means you're not a citizen of any country. You don't have the rights of a citizen in any country. No one will make a passport for you. So try traveling with without a passport. Of course, maybe you can cross a border with some kind of documentation, but you're not going to be able to roam the world and be a tourist and like we do, and the way I certainly sometimes take for granted, being able to move around in the world. And this trip into this refugee camp made a big impact on me. So when things like this happen, like pandemic, oh my God, I cannot go home to Vietnam, I have to stay in Thailand, I have that moment of, oh, I'm stuck. But then I remember, like, I'm not living in a refugee camp in the Sahara, and I'm not stateless. I will be able to travel. I am not stuck. I'm actually, like, still able to move freely in the world. It's just a temporary restriction. But experiences like that sometimes remind me to be grateful for the things that I have and for the freedoms that I have. I'm certainly not trapped. Okay, last but not least, I want to take you to Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa. In English it's called Ivory Coast, but they prefer to be called Côte d'Ivoire, which is my very English pronunciation of a French name of a country. I went there just because I wanted to, because I love traveling in Africa. I became a little bit obsessed with Ivorian music, and I had to go and hear it, for myself. And I got in touch with a girl called Regina. I think I saw Armel watching. Hi, if you're still there, her husband. Regina and I met on a website called Couchsurfing, which is a website that connects travelers with hosts in different countries. They have it in like pretty much every country. So you can look for people to stay with when you're traveling. And there are so many great things that for me have come out of this, because you meet a local person who hopefully becomes a good friend of yours, and they get to show you things that you would never have found or seen or experienced if you were just like staying in a hotel and not really knowing anybody local. And especially traveling solo, I found that to be a great way to really learn about local cultures. So this is me arriving at Regina's place. Regina lived in a concrete housing complex for university students. Luckily, a couple of guys volunteered to carry my bags up to the 6th floor. Even with no expectations, I was slightly shocked seeing my new rundown home. Regina had a single room with a queen bed, TV, fridge, and some closets. She cooked on a portable gas stove on the balcony floor. She filled her buckets of water every night at the communal taps. They had running water after 10 at night and sometimes all day on Sunday. Regina used powered detergent to wash dishes, laundry, hands, and the floor. Somehow she managed to keep the tiny living space incredibly neat and organized, and I was touched by her willingness to share it with a complete stranger. But where would I hang 20 dance costumes? I couldn't leave them in the bags for very long, and the bags alone covered half the floor space. It was a dilemma for another day. Right now, I was more concerned with cleaning myself. The toilet and the shower, if they could be called that, were in the hallway. Regina shared them with the approximately 5 guys next door. Their room was as small as hers, but there were bunk beds and makeshift partitions, so getting an exact head count was hard. The toilet was a seatless, lidless, cracked, dirty bowl. To flush, you poured in water from a bucket you brought along. Regina knew white people liked toilet paper, so she had some ready for me. The shower was a separate room. Regina gave me an African cloth to wrap around myself, along with soap and a bucket of water. A piece of wire held the bathroom door shut. There was a sizable hole in the door, like someone kicked through it. The floor was covered in sand and flakes of paint from the walls. I hung the cloth and my towel on a clothesline and squatted to splash myself with the cold water. I leaked some blood on the floor in the process. I tried to rinse it with the little water I had left, but traces of blood stuck between the tiles. I was the dirty one. Now, I must say, when I started to hear about the toilet paper crisis, that took over the Western world, my initial thought was the entire Africa is laughing at us. I heard this thing about toilet paper a few times when traveling in Africa. Like, what is it that you white people do with the toilet paper? Like what is this thing about toilet paper? Like, what does that accomplish? And don't get me wrong, I love toilet paper, okay? I'm a daily fan of it, but I've definitely gone through times without. I can definitely survive without. And I think many people realize through this crisis, that actually they can live without it. I guess for many countries, not just African countries, Asian countries as well, the standard of cleaning something is that you use water, not just some dry paper and throw it away. Now, Regina has moved a few times to a few countries ever since that time that we met. Right now she's living in Zimbabwe. She married a French guy and they have 2 cute kids, and we visited them in Zimbabwe 2 years ago. And she said something interesting. She was talking about the couple of years that they lived in France together with her family, her husband and kids. And she said that, all these Africans think that Europe is the place to be, and Europe is paradise, and they will go through anything just to get to Europe. But it's not some kind of dreamland. And actually, when she was living there, she was feeling kind of down and feeling a little depressed. And that's not like her at all. She's a very optimistic and positive person. But the way of life feels very stiff to someone coming from a different culture. And she said that I didn't know it, but when I was living in Côte d'Ivoire, I didn't have much, but I was so happy and so free. I was so free. And that really struck a chord with me. Like, in France, she realized that, the more stuff you have, the more stuff you need. This kind of Western consumerist lifestyle takes over a little bit, and you never have enough, and that doesn't give you freedom, and that doesn't give you happiness. So I think that goes to show that freedom is also a state of mind. In addition to everything else, it's a state of mind. It's your approach to life. And now she lives in a house that is so big I got lost in it. There's like 7 rooms, plus I couldn't find my way in there. It was crazy. So things have really changed for her since we met. She's a dear friend of mine. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to read today. Hope you enjoyed it. There is a book link if you want to see about the book on Amazon. I think the easiest way is to just go on my Facebook profile and go on my profile picture, and the link is right there. Feel free to share this talk with any friends that might need reminding that, freedom will come back and we're still free in many ways. And thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. I love you.